Hi, my name is Rochelle Lentini, and I am here today to talk to you about supporting children coping with autoimmune juvenile arthritis. Just so you know a little bit about me, I have autoimmune rheumatoid arthritis and have been diagnosed now for about a year. I have also had allergies, severe allergies, and asthma for about 23 years. My husband and I have 2 children with autoimmune juvenile arthritis. Our 16-year-old son, Logan, has enthesitis-related arthritis and severe migraines. Our 13-year-old son has systemic onset juvenile arthritis with overlapping syndromes of myositis, vasculitis, Raynaud's, and psoriatic features, along with hypogammaglobulinemia, which is an immune issue. I currently work at the University of South Florida, and I direct a project called Program-Wide Positive Behavior Support, which is working with teachers and professionals in early childhood and special education for children birth through 5. I'm also involved with 2 national centers, TAXI, the Technical Assistance Center on Social Emotional Interventions, and the Center on Social Emotional Foundations for Early Learning, or fondly called CEFL. I encourage you to visit both of these websites as they have extensive information around social emotional development and supporting young children. But there are also many activities you can do with your children. There are some family tip sheets along with some reproducibles that you can print out and use. In addition, I am co-founder with Dawn Veselka of the High Five Club. This was recently started by us as a nonprofit to benefit children with chronic illness and their families. In this session, I will talk about some impacts of autoimmune JA on the family, the multiple roles of parents, some available resources that you might want to access, social emotional coping, and empowering toddlers, preschoolers, school-age children, and teens with tools that will take them into adulthood. Children who have juvenile arthritis are also considered children with special needs. We know that children with special needs are at risk regardless of their diagnosis for psychosocial issues, educational needs, and health concerns. Oftentimes, our children are requiring additional medical services. And because children with juvenile arthritis fall under the category of special needs, it is important that parents know that their children are eligible for accommodations and modifications under a 504 plan or an IEP, in other words, an individualized education plan. We know that juvenile arthritis has a great impact on our families. It impacts the parents, it impacts the child who has JA, along with siblings, but it also impacts our entire extended family. The research shows us that it disrupts parental and family functioning. As you can well imagine, having to go to multiple appointments, medical procedures, getting treatment, getting equipment, it takes time out of our daily schedule. We also know that it can lead to feelings of uncertainty and loss of control. Because of the nature of juvenile arthritis and not knowing what each day has to bring, we often don't know what's going to happen from day to day. We also know that it creates additional challenges and intense difficulties in trying to navigate through and work with medical systems. You're working with insurance companies, pharmacies, doctors' offices, and many other medical facilities. Parents of children with juvenile arthritis are required to wear many hats. As you well know, if you are a parent, you are the coordinator of all care. You become your child's spokesperson when at school and working on plans for your children's modifications and accommodations or supports that they might need for their educational success. You have to really dive into the medical information and almost become a medical expert in the world of juvenile arthritis. You may end up becoming an advocate in the traditional sense of advocacy, but you will continuously advocate for your child and teach your child to advocate for themselves. You also may be their personal ambassador, and you represent your child. And depending on the age of your child, you may even be your child's voice. So when you have a child with a chronic illness or an autoimmune disease like juvenile arthritis, you might become hypervigilant about creating a sense of balance in your life. So I'd like you to pause for a moment and really take a look at this visual. You will see a pyramid, and at the base of that pyramid are the positive and nurturing, responsive relationships and environments. If you think about this, this is the foundation of this entire teeter-totter. You need this broad base. You need people in your life. You need to be thinking about the positive interactions and interactions that you encounter and creating an environment that will support what is needed in your life. At the middle of the pyramid are targeted supports. And these may include things to help your child be successful, but also to help you be successful. In creating a balance in one's life, you might need support of people, of resources, of your educational system, of your work. But it also might include supports like exercise and food and nutrition and interventions like therapy. And sometimes there is intensive needs or intensive interventions. Your child might need counseling. Your family might need counseling. Your child might need surgeries or procedures or infusion treatments on an ongoing basis. They may even need multiple testing. But in order for this pyramid to stand strong and hold up that balance that is so needed, we have to think about what is it trying to hold up. On one side of that teeter-totter, we know that families have to deal with medical needs. This is ongoing. It's going to happen, and it's going to happen. We also know that social services may be involved, and you may have to seek out social services. Of course, if your child is school age or in college, education is involved. We know that this whole balance includes the siblings. Just because you have one child with an autoimmune disease or an illness or a need doesn't mean that we can forget all of those incredible needs that children have as they grow and develop. Their siblings need just as much support. We also know that finances can take a strain as you have to help provide what is needed medically for your child. And we know that oftentimes there's a partner involved who also has needs, who also has desires, who also are a part of this dynamic that's happening around creating this balance. Emotional needs are definitely going to need to be addressed, and of course, therapies. Now, if all we do are all those things on the left side, we will not have a sense of balance. That teeter-totter will definitely teeter, and chaos may happen. Stress will be intensified. So it is important to create a sense of balance by thinking about those things on the right side. Thinking about seeking out and accepting help. Sometimes we have to pause and think about what is it that we need and who can help us get that. We also have to think about adapting our priorities. What may have been important in the past may not need to be a priority at this point in time. We have to think about our own health, our own exercise, our own health and nutrition. And of course, as we're doing all of this, it is important to remember our relationships and continue to build our friendships and maintain those interactions. I will say that having a child with juvenile arthritis does help bring clarity to who our true friends are and what relationships we can count on. We also know that having a child with JA is going to impact our work. So we have to think about that balance. For me personally, work is important. The work that I do impacts many, but it also fulfills me. However, it also carries our health insurance. So I must work. I must work to provide for my children's needs. We know that advocacy is a way that we can create a sense of balance, because when we advocate, we are doing something that's within our control. And oftentimes, when you have a child who has such intensive needs, you lose balance when you lose that sense of control. So advocacy is one way that can bring that back, or bring that sense of control back. It is also very important to think about family time and vacations and downtime, and build that into your day, your months, your years. I know at times the medical needs outweigh, or the educational needs outweigh. But I think it is very, very important to always be thinking about, what can I do to balance that? So let's go back in time. Let's think about when your child was diagnosed. Let's think about those emotions, those reactions you may have had. I know for myself, my initial reaction was probably like many. My immediate thought was, thank God it's just rheumatoid arthritis. Thank God it's only an autoimmune disease. Now, the reason that I went through this reaction is because I as a parent had already gone through multiple tests to rule out other very severe diseases, including cancer. I also have been witness to a family member with cancer. So all I could think was, this child will be okay. What I did not know was that there are ranges of the severity of autoimmune diseases. And for Parker in particular, he's more on the severe end. And Logan, thank goodness, is more on the mild end. Now, Logan's diagnosis was much easier for our family to take only because we had already been through this once. However, I want to go back to Parker. We definitely went through what typical families go through after receiving a diagnosis. We know the research shows us that there are stages that oftentimes families have to process through. And once we realized the enormity of what we were dealing with around systemic juvenile arthritis and how it can impact not only the joints, but the internal organs and everything in the body, it is not until then that we really pause to think about what we had said when he was diagnosed. So, although I am very thankful to have a diagnosis, it is incredibly frustrating to not know where that diagnosis is taking us because we don't know what the future holds. There's still so many uncertainties, so much research happening. So we did go through a grieving process where we lost the Parker that we knew and watched him grow into his new self because he had to create a new sense of self. Parker was a child who was incredibly active and in sports and always out and about and social. And he went from being on multiple sports teams to no longer being able to physically do what was required of sports. So he had to find new outlets and new activities. And when that starts happening, the family begins to adapt to these changes that are absolutely necessary in order to survive, in order to go through your day-to-day. But the issue with juvenile arthritis is there's so much uncertainty. You don't know from one year to the next if your child's going to hit remission, medicated or not, or if their disease is going to flare, or if they're going to have additional autoimmune issues pop up. And for us as a family, that alone has been such a ride, trying to figure out from day to day where we're going and what we're doing and being okay with where we are in moments in time. So these stages really of how we react as a parent are one thing, but when you think about the enormity of dealing with this as a child, depending on the child's age and functional ability and just the stability of their family is going to play a part in how one copes with getting this diagnosis. So one thing that has happened with our family and with many families is that you find that you go in these waves where you can have a moment of complete elation and celebration over an incredible accomplishment to having in the next moment just devastating news where chronic sorrow just creeps right back in as your child goes through all of these waves of this disease. And we do recognize that, our family may have had to go through some things that other families haven't had to go through. But I really, truly believe that this is a process for each individual family, regardless of severity. The diagnosis does impact the coping within a family system. So what we know is that this is a common response. And if we don't recognize what we're going through and how we're coping, or if we try to minimize what is happening to a family or to a child, or even try to minimize how one is feeling, that can put the family or individuals within the family at very high risk for clinical depression. So, in continuing with what the research is showing us, we know that there are studies that have been done in particular on parenting children with juvenile arthritis. So one of the things we have found out that is with JA, this uncertain prognosis really can lead to fears and worries about the future. There's so many uncertainties. So that is something that as a family, we need to process this thought. We also know that more positive interpretations of the illness, so our attitudes and our views and how we process what is going on, can really lead to how effectively we adapt to dealing with juvenile arthritis. And then we know that if a family is cohesive, intact, and they can communicate effectively with each other, there is a much better chance to adjust and cope with dealing with the uncertainties of juvenile arthritis. So I bring you back to that earlier visual of the teeter-totter. And I think that what the research is showing and what we know about family dynamics is that we do live in this world of trying to create balance. And so the more we can create that balance in our lives, the better we'll be able to cope and beat the juvenile arthritis world. So when adjusting to chronic illness, there are some things to consider in regards to success. We know that successfully coming to terms with this disease requires that the family and the medical staff and the educational world really communicate. They seek out information and they seek out support. The family cannot do this alone, but having that open dialogue is really important. And parental adaptation and interpretation is also important to coming to terms with the illness and the ongoing needs of children with juvenile arthritis. Family needs are not often addressed in the medical settings. I mean, let's face it, you have an appointment, the doctor has a certain amount of time, they have results possibly to review, medical treatment to review, and so their primary concern is to think about the medical health of your child. So I think it's very important that although they are watching and making sure that your child is getting the medical help that you need, you have to remember that sense of balance. And if your family is a family who needs that social emotional support, counseling may be something to consider. Also, there are many tools and techniques that a family can use, and multiple resources which I'm about to share. So I have now shared with you lots of information about the impact of this disease on the family, the things that your children need, that you might need as a parent, how this impacts the education and the medical needs of your entire family and the siblings. And when you think about the enormity of dealing with a chronic illness like juvenile arthritis, I am certain it brings up many difficult emotions. And as you try to work through these different feelings and go through the treatment and therapies and procedures and medical needs of your child, I think it is really important that you pause to think about the fact that it is okay to be in a place where you might have these very intense feelings or needs, and yet at the same time, it is also incredibly important that these emotions that you go through as a family don't start to impact your interactions and reactions with the people who are involved in your life. And that's easier said than done, but I think that it's important first to recognize that it is certainly expected that you go through these emotions and that these emotions are validated. However, we do have to work through them. And so I'm going to share with you some ideas and some thoughts and some resources that might actually be useful in helping you and your child as you try to cope with juvenile arthritis. So one of the first things that we often work on with families in particular who have children with special needs is to think about how you're communicating. And if you think about the fact that communication can drive how people react and interact, it is important to stay very clear and precise as you can be, especially in dealing with young children, because how they process information developmentally is very different than how you might process information with possibly a teenager. So one of the strategies that we suggest using for children who are elementary age and younger is to phrase directions or demands or requests in a first then statement. For instance, first get dressed, then we can put on your favorite movie. Of course, there's also going to be moments where children have to do things that involve their JA. So, framing things in this manner, like first take your medicine and then we can go to the movies, or first do your physical therapy and then we'll go to your favorite restaurant, or first simply clean up your room and then you can go outside to play. So the reason that we recommend using this kind of terminology is because I think many of us were raised with the idea of if you don't, then you can't. And not that that is completely wrong. I just think that the message that young children hear is very different. So for young children, if you don't clean up your room, then you can't go outside, sounds very punitive, very negative. And it also doesn't give a sense of that you believe they can achieve it. It also is hard for children to understand what the negation of words do to the meaning of a verb. So if you simply change that verbiage to first clean up, then you can go outside and play, even the tone that we're using is more supportive in nature. So I simply suggest trying it and seeing if it works with your child. The other strategy that we often use, and this is for all children, is providing choices. I think that even for us adults, if we have a choice in a situation, we're much more likely to hang in or to comply. Choice gives you a little bit of a sense of power or control, and children are the same way. They need to know that they have options. So, I mean, if your doctor said to you, you must do this, but they don't give you any choices in when or how, then you're going to feel like you don't have a voice. So simply offering choices from very simple childlike choices where, do you want to sit next to mommy or daddy, or do you want to drink from the blue cup or the green cup, all the way to possibly things like, do you want to do your math first or your reading first, or do you want to go swimming today, or do you want to go on a walk today? So I think oftentimes we have to have our children do certain things, and we as parents can have control and limit those choices. However, offering choices gives the child a sense that they have some control, but it also increases the likelihood that they might do something that you need them to do. So consider giving children choices. The other thing that we have used a lot in the world of education is the use of visuals and visual supports. And I think, for young children, visuals might look very different than for older children. So if you think about the visuals you create for yourself as an adult, that might be things like your calendar and putting, your appointments on the calendar. It might be your grocery list. It might be your to-do list. And certainly we create these visuals to help us recall and to remember, but also to actually do some of the things that we need to do. And oftentimes we give directions to children, and we just expect them to hear it and remember it and do it. And when they don't, then there is either chaos, or children might be in trouble, or they might lose privileges, or there just might be tension or stress or argument. So if you offer children visuals, in addition to giving them that verbal request or demand, they're much more likely to do it, but they also might use it as a way of recalling what it is exactly they're supposed to do. And I'm going to show you some examples of some visuals, but also, simply for older children, writing out or having your child write out what is needed might be helpful. For your older children, they also may need to learn to take certain medicines at certain times. And so having them sit down with you and create a visual list of when those times are and what they need to take and what the dosing is a visual that can not only help them to recall what exactly they need to do, but might also empower them to have a little bit of a sense of control over what is happening with them. For younger children, it might be, visual pictures or photographs or line drawings to help them understand going through steps of what is needed, or possibly doing a routine that might be difficult for them. It could be something as simply as a toothbrushing routine, and having photos of each individual step so that they know what to do and in what order to do it. But it also could be wrapped around a therapy that they may need to do, or an exercise, or some sort of medical need that they might have. And finally, giving children clear expectations. Oftentimes we tell children what they're not supposed to do. We might say, don't run, or stop yelling, or I don't like it when you fight with your sibling. However, again, just like the first then phrases gives the child a message in a much more positive, supportive nature, giving children clear expectations gives them an opportunity to hear what is needed in a very positive, proactive way. And this is especially true for very young children. So when I say very young, I say like 6, 7, and younger. When we tell children, no, don't stop, they know they're in trouble. They know something is wrong. They know that mom and dad or big sister is upset with them, but they don't know what necessarily to do instead. And so by clarifying expectations, they do know. So let me give you a for instance. A friend of mine had a child who was always running out into the road when they would go out front to play. And when this happened, the mom, of course, was quite upset, yelling and screaming and telling her to no, that's not safe, get out of the road. And yet the child did not know what they were supposed to do instead. Now, the parent thought the child knew, but the child did not know. So she asked me, what should I do? How can I get her to stop going into the road? And I said, what is it exactly that you want her to do? And she said, I want her to stay in the yard. And I said, then that is what you need to tell her. And she just kind of looked at me and I said, where else can she play? Where can she play? And she said she can play in the yard, she can play on the driveway, she can play on the front porch. And I said, then that's what you need to tell her. Stay in the yard, or stay on the driveway, or stay on the porch. And she looked at me like, oh my gosh, is it really that easy? And all she did was change her verbiage from stop running in the street, or don't go in the street, to stay in the yard, stay on the driveway, stay on the porch, and the child complied. The child knew exactly what to do. It was spoken in a way that the child could comprehend, and the child did it. Now, I know that that sounds like a very simple form of communication. I encourage you, if you have young children, please try it. Children who are young have a very difficult time trying to figure out what it is they're supposed to do if you don't tell them exactly what it is they're supposed to do. So I just encourage you to try that as a strategy, and it might work for you and your child. Now, as we think about some of the strategies and ideas and resources, one of the resources that I find really helpful is this idea of filling up your bucket. And there's a wonderful book out there for adults, and it's called How to Fill Your Bucket, or How Full is Your Bucket, excuse me. And it's by Tom Rath and Donald Clifton. The idea is that all of us carry an invisible bucket around with us. And we are our very best when our buckets are full and overflowing. And we're able to accomplish much more if our buckets are full. And yet, if our buckets are empty, we're at our very worst. We have no reserves. We have nothing to pull from. So we need to think about having a full bucket or having a full life. And so whenever we choose to fill other people's buckets, we are also filling our own. Because when we do good for others, when we help others, when we compliment others, when we interact with others and spend time with others in a positive way, that in turn does fill up our own emotional bucket. We also know that just as we're walking around with our invisible bucket, this idea of having this bucket comes in addition with an invisible dipper. And we all have had people in our lives who take. And when you have someone who takes, they are dipping into your bucket and they are pulling some of that out of your bucket. We also know that it may not be people that take from our bucket. So if there's hardship in our life, if our children are struggling, those are also considered our invisible dippers, where if we are experiencing stress, then our buckets are being emptied. So there's, just as there is the book for adults, we have two books here, one for toddlers and preschoolers called Fill a Bucket by Carol McLeod, and then we also have one for school-aged children, Have You Filled a Bucket Today? And this is for teaching children how to fill up their buckets in a way that they have the reserves they need to cope and to deal and to interact and and to fill other people's buckets. As we move through some of these next few slides, I want to talk a little bit about how every child needs skills around building resilience. We know that young children and adults need emotional expression, need to know how to problem solve, need to have strategies to help them cope with pain or disappointment and loss. And also, they need to learn how to become self-advocates. If we can help our children learn the skills that are needed to build their resilience, these are the things that they can take into their adulthood and will help them through all the many stages of growing and coping and dealing with juvenile arthritis. So in order to build our child's ability to express their own emotions and to understand emotions, and this includes not only the children with juvenile arthritis, but the children who may not have juvenile arthritis, it is important that we think of the variety of ways we can support them. So you might consider talking about your own feelings as a parent. This can help them see that it is, one, okay to have emotions, but that you too are going through some feelings. With younger children, you might want to use storybooks or characters from stories and talk about the emotions in literature, or possibly talk about some of the emotions that are going on in videos or in TV shows. It might be important to reflect on particular situations that are happening in the child's life or in your life, and really sit down and discuss how those situations are causing you and the child to feel, and to discuss how those feelings are possibly driving your actions and reactions. And then I think it's really important that we teach our children a variety of emotional vocabulary. You know, in our culture, we don't talk a lot about our emotions. However, we have seen that, especially with young children, if we teach them words like frustrated and disappointed and anxious and confused and hurt and worried and scared, and they have the words to say those things, then they're much less likely to act out and to show what they're feeling through challenging behavior. So I encourage you to teach children how to express their emotions in a way that's much more socially acceptable, but also is much more effective. I think children need to be validated so that they know that these words are okay to say and to have and to hold, but then we have to help them move through that. You might say to a child who's having difficulty coming up with words, "Tell me how you feel." That might sound a little hokey, but it does work. And if they don't want to tell you, they will tell you that too. But I think opening up the opportunity to have that dialogue is important. Supporting and accepting your child's expression of feelings and validating that emotion is important. You know, our kids may feel one way about a particular situation, and we may feel entirely different. It doesn't mean that one of our emotions is inappropriate or wrong. It just means that they're different, and we both can have those emotions. So I think helping children understand that we can have different views on things is also very important. You might describe your child's expressions if they're really young, because some children may not have the verbal skills yet to say how they're feeling. So you might say, "I see you're sad. I see you crying. You must be sad." So using your voice to put words on the very young children's expressions of emotion. You might, with younger children, again, try pretending or playing and using feeling words with the things that are familiar to them but are not about them themselves, like using toys or stuffed animals or puppets and dolls and action figures, so that you can have a safe conversation around these characters rather than the child. Some children really enjoy drawing pictures about how they feel, so that's another strategy you might consider. And I think it's incredibly important that we as parents model how to cope and how to stay calm. And that's at all levels of your child's development, from very young all the way through teens to adulthood. I think our children are always watching, and our children are always taking in, even if we say nothing. And so showing them through our actions how we cope and how to stay calm and how to process is very important too. So one of the things that is available on the Cephal website, which is one of the websites I showed you on some of the first slides, is this resource around using pictures to teach feeling words to really young children. And on the website, they're available in both English and Spanish, but there's also other feeling activities, and there's some feeling book nooks. So for folks who have younger children, you might want to check out this resource and print it and use some of the activities and ideas. So, in addition to the previous slide and the simple drawings around feelings and emotions, you might want to consider using these more complex or older looking drawings. And it also dives into some words that are a little bit more complex also. So these are available on a Head Start Center website, and there's additional visuals that go along with what you can see here that you might want to consider printing out and using. Now, remember how I said that we as parents are the model for our children? The idea of this turtle technique is a technique in teaching self-management around anger, and it was originally developed for adults. Interestingly, it was for adults who were abusive to their children and were needing to learn how to stay calm and to process and to come up with solutions. And since then, it's been used in the world of education and has been fondly termed as the turtle technique for younger children. But in a sense, this is a strategy that can be used by anyone at any age, and it's really to help model remaining calm. So you teach children how to control their feelings and to calm down through steps, 4 simple steps. So first they have to recognize the emotion that they're having, and they have to stop. Then they go inside their shell and take their 3 deep breaths and come out when they're calm and think of a good solution. So moving through this process and helping them learn these steps gives them the opportunity to think about how to self-regulate and practice self-regulation so that they don't lose control. Now, the only way this will work is if you practice these steps frequently with children, and that you help prepare them ahead of time when you know that they might have to handle something that's really difficult or disappointing, or change is about to happen that might trigger this response in them. And most importantly, recognize and comment when your child stays calm, because if they do this successfully, which can be very hard for some people to do, we want to reinforce the fact that they've done something so remarkable as staying calm and despite what is going on. So for young children, again, we use visuals to help them remember. So, of course, like I said, the first step is 1, you got to recognize your feelings. So in this case, the turtle here is angry. And then we have to think about stopping. So the first thing we say to children is think, stop. Because if you don't stop and you react, children might say something that is inappropriate, or they might physically do something that is inappropriate. So we want them to stop. And then we tell them to physically practice going inside their shell and taking 3 deep breaths. And we literally have them take those breaths with an adult. So we might say something like, we're going to smell the flowers and blow out the candles, or we're going to smell the flowers and blow the bubbles. So we literally say, let's practice together. We're going to take 3 deep breaths. Ready? 1, breathe in, smell the flowers, and blow out the candles. 2, smell the flowers, blow out the candles. And then, of course, 3. Now, here's what happens. The reason we have children literally take those breaths, or adults, is that there's a physiological thing that occurs within the body as you take deep breaths. So think about this. When you're angry, you might hear white noise. You might clench your teeth. You might see a change in color in your face. You might sweat. You might clench your hands. You may feel your heart start to race and your breath to get quicker. So there's things that are physically happening to your body when you're angry, and those are the things you want children to begin to recognize, that when they have that feeling physically, that it might be that they're angry or frustrated and that they need to stop. Now, in order to be able to think calmly, to come up with solutions, you first have to physically regulate your body. So when you take those 3 deep breaths in and out, you are literally slowing your heart rate, slowing your breathing, and as a result, your mind becomes clearer, your color returns to normal, you may become more relaxed. And so I think it's important that when we say to children, you need to calm down, that may only trigger them to get more angry, or they may not even know what calm looks like. So teaching them how to get themselves to a place where they are breathing slow, they are regulating their heart rate, then you can actually think. So that's when you come out of your shell and you think of solutions. So another way to regulate those emotions, in addition to the turtle technique, might be some of these kinds of strategies. So I know that many of your children might have treatments that are difficult, or they might need to take shots, and all those things can really be scary. And when you're scared, a very similar physical reaction starts to happen to your body as when you're angry. So getting to a place where you can regulate your emotions and do things that put you in a place to be able to better cope with something like shot night, you might want to consider doing some things like the slow deep breaths with the turtle, but it might also be listening to music for one child, or it might be blowing bubbles for another child. Or your child might actually like distraction technique and having a favorite TV show on that they can concentrate on while something else is happening that might not be so easy to do. So on this website here, there are some different visuals around emotional regulation, and you might want to offer your child a choice visually and options, or if your child is older, you might just simply verbally offer this. So when you have a child with chronic illness, oftentimes problems arise. I mean, let's be for real. Problems arise regardless if you have children with chronic illness. One of the things we need to do is, as parents, is to teach our children to problem solve. And if we as parents are successful in teaching our children to problem solve, then when they become adults, this will serve them well in the world of business and in their professional careers. But I think it's really important to teach them each individual step that it takes in order to problem solve. So again, for young children, we might use visuals like this, and for older children, we might simply have the verbiage written out, or we might talk them through it. So First, you have to know you have a problem, so thinking about what is my problem. Then we tell children, let's think of some possible solutions, and oftentimes they can generate some of those ideas, but if they cannot, maybe facilitating what some of those solutions might be would be helpful. And then we need to ask that question, what would happen if we did that? And more particularly, would it be safe? Would it be fair? And how would everyone feel? And then you give it a try. Now, sometimes a solution that we think might work doesn't work. And so when we give it a try and it doesn't work, it doesn't mean that we're done. We might still have that problem. So we have to loop through those processes again and think of solutions and then what might happen and giving it another try. So what this process does is to teach our children to be persistent and to not give up, and to think of ways that they can make something better. It may not take a situation totally away or a problem totally away, but there's certainly things that you can do that can soften things that are difficult. So when we're helping children think of those possible solutions, there are a variety of things that they might consider. And again, on that SAFO website, there's some beautiful little visuals for young children. But again, our older children, we might just simply need to help them generate possible solutions. So, for the very young children, or for children who might be volatile in the reactions or get aggressive, we always teach them to get an adult first. If they are not at a place yet where problem solving is something that they can navigate through successfully on their own, then we would encourage them to get an adult. Then the adult would help them through those possible solutions. But as you can see, there's a variety of solutions that might work in a variety of different situations, like asking nicely, ignoring, playing together, saying please stop, share, trade, talk about it, make another choice. Maybe the child needs to take a break or wait and take turns. And again, this list can go on and on. Again, there's some other older looking visuals that are available at this website if you choose to go to this website for maybe your elementary children and check out what's on there for some options around problem solving ideas and possible solutions. So one thing that's really important to begin teaching your child at a very young age is the notion of self-advocacy. And what I mean by that is that we know that our children with juvenile arthritis are going to be dealing with this for some time. And if they're not dealing with it all the way through their childhood years and they go into remission, there is a chance that it could come back. And so it is very important that we help our children recognize that they can have a voice. And so some of the things you can work with your child on are getting them to think about asking for information. So you might help them prepare some questions for the doctor or therapists or any of the specialists they might be working with. You might structure opportunities for them to really do some research and helping them go through looking for some answers to some questions they might have. You might actually debrief with your child before they walk into a doctor's appointment so that they can almost pre-talk or have some conversation beforehand so that you can talk about, if the doctor says this, maybe how can we react, or if this is mentioned, what could we possibly do? So having that time to debrief with your child is important, but also debriefing in the sense of after an appointment, thinking through all the information that they have received and processing it. I think it's really important that from the very beginning, as much as the child developmentally can, they should be part of the discussion. I really gravitate to doctors who acknowledge children's presence. I think that children need to feel like this is their body, it's happening to them, and it is something that they are coping with. And so, using your child's name, inviting them into conversations when it's appropriate, and being very careful about the language you yourself as the parent uses. I know that we're all in this together as a family unit, and but be very aware of phrases like, we're now taking this medication, or we now have to go to this therapy. It is your child that has to go through that therapy. It is your child that has to take that medication. And they are the ones who own it and need to have that voice. Also, understanding options and make meaningful choices. So again, being informed is important, and when you're informed, you're able to make better choices. So making sure that your child learns how to, one, identify the options or choices that they might have, but then helping them process through those options and making maybe a pros and cons list. And this can be for not only medical situations, but maybe social interactions, or school, or an event even. So helping them think through those pros and cons is leading them towards being able to be a self-advocate. Also, I think it's important we teach our children to challenge any unfair or unjust treatment. It is not okay when even an adult treats a child in an inappropriate way, or speaks to them in a way that is not respectful. So I think it is important that they learn how to also speak up for themselves. One thing that you can do to help children is allow them to journal or to log, and teach them how to log what is happening in their body. One of the resources that I find really useful is something called the Body Check Journal, and we've actually used this with Parker and Logan to track the food intake, their sleeping habits, and how they feel, to look for trends, to see if possibly there are things that are contributing to the way they are feeling. But the really cool thing is it allows for them to have notes to take into the doctor and have some dialogue, and to begin to self-advocate for themselves as they interact with the doctor in trying to figure out what are the next best steps. What have you tried? What are you thinking about trying? What do you think is triggering? Is there something that you did that helped you feel better? Sometimes children, by simply journaling, start realizing that if they pace themselves in a certain way, then they can handle something longer. Or if they soak in a tub after doing a sporting event, then they don't get as stiff. So it might be, that trial and error kind of data that helps make some informed decisions. Another resource that's out there for teens and emerging adults is this resource called Envisioning My Future. And it might be something that if you have teenagers, you go and visit this website. It is great. It not only has tips about transitioning to adulthood, but it gives you some wonderful little checklists, and there's some great resources for young adults. This is another resource. It happens to be from the Children's Medical Services in Florida, and it's a quick little 10-step checklist about transitioning into taking care of one's own health as a teenager. It's available as a bookmarker in both Spanish and in English, so that's another resource that you might want to take a look at. Another youth resource is this 411 on disability disclosure, and it's for youths who have disability, and it will guide children through a workbook kind of interaction to think about what is the information they need in order to get the accommodations and modifications they might need. And then there's another little booklet called When You're 18, and it is showing children again how to become their own health advocate as they transition to adulthood. What is really cool about this particular resource called When You're 18 is they've developed this wonderful little acronym called GLADD, GLADD, and it's a quick little acronym to remind children the steps that they need to be thinking about. So the G stands for giving information. So preparing your child to provide information and to answer questions is really important. And then listen is having to do with helping your child develop a system to remember and record information. And then ask is to support your child in asking those questions to the medical field or therapists or providers that they might be working with. Decide involves creating the opportunity for your child to have an active role or voice. And then the do. That is creating the do list or designing that checklist that will help your children. So again, that's that visual we were talking about earlier, and helping your child have a sense of control, but also helping them move through what they need to move through. So it's their plan of action. So I have provided for you various resources and tips throughout this presentation. However, there's also a PDF file that is available if you go back into the website and look next to my bio. There should be a PDF file there that is a bunch of resources on coping and around social emotional strategies and tips, along with a variety of some resources around families and disability and special needs and juvenile arthritis. So I encourage you to take a moment and print that out and or possibly download it right to your computer, because then you can click on those links and visit those various websites. So in conclusion, and there are my two beautiful boys, Logan and Parker. In conclusion, we know that JA impacts the entire family, and we as parents take on multiple roles. It is really important that we figure out a way to cope and to balance what's going on in our lives. So I encourage you to utilize the resources that we've provided and to really think about how those resources can help you minimize the consequences of raising a child with juvenile arthritis. It certainly does impact our daily lives. But again, it is completely normal to experience the emotions that go along with dealing with a child who might have juvenile arthritis. And again, how we view the situations that we are dealt or that we have to move through can impact how we adjust and cope. So I know that dealing with a chronic illness is chronic, but we do have some power and control over feeling those emotions and then moving into action and adjusting and coping in a way where we're teaching our children how to look for those positives in lives, to set new priorities, and to really think about their friendships and life in possibly a new way. We are our children's model, and so if we think about that, oftentimes they're going to mirror what they see from us, and so we can teach them how to cope in very powerful ways. And coping begins very early. If we empower our children, even the young toddlers, all the way through our teens, then they will have the tools that they need when they reach adulthood to continue to thrive and to continue to problem solve and to contribute to this world and to give back to their communities. So I thank you for this time that we've had together, and I encourage you to go back into the website and print out the PDF file of the tips and resources, and I wish all of you well and much happiness. Thank you.